vigilance, the action or state of keeping careful watch, standing guard, defending the bulwark between the righteous and the godless.
Hey everyone, Lance Earl here. My webcast today has two purposes. The first purpose is to reach out and reason with the good people at the Eastside Baptist Church in Twin Falls, Idaho. You see, I believe that there are a lot of really good people there, and I hope that they will hear what I have to say with an open mind. The second reason is I will be sending this, along with a formal grievance, to those people who are superior to Pastor Paul Thompson, who is the pastor at that same church. In the house of God, over the pulpit of God, in the name of God, you have been warned about this evil Mormon who is coming to Twin Falls to destroy your lives and lead you away. We're going to address that a little bit today. Now, Pastor Thompson has made most of his allegations simply a matter of attacking my faith. So I think that's where we should start, is with my faith. Now, he says I'm a Mormon, and the truth is I was raised as a Mormon, and certainly I have been influenced by that upbringing. I don't deny that. But still, that doesn't identify who I am or what I believe. And so I would like to share with you what my religion really is and how it relates with the Mormon Church. You see, just about a year ago, I wrote a column which talked about the evils of CRP. Now, these are farm subsidies, which are blatantly unconstitutional, evil, dark, and wrong. And after having that column appear in my monthly or my weekly Idaho State Journal column, my bishop called me into his office and told me that I was to never write, teach, speak about my faith again, upon penalty of losing my temple recommend. Well, I made it clear to him that I had protections under the First Amendment. We also have a principle in Mormonism that is called free agency. We have the agency to choose who we are, what we believe, and to move, act, think, and do according to our own conscience. That's basic to our beliefs. And so a month or so later, I wrote another column, and I referenced a booklet written by Ezra Taft Benson, which he called The Proper Role of Government. And I think that's a very good booklet. It ought to be required reading for every American, in my belief. Anyway, I wrote that, and on the Sunday it appeared in print, my bishop took my temple recommend. Now, moving forward, on Sunday, August 6th of this year, while Thompson delivered a sermon in which he attacked me, I sat in my home ward in Rockland, Idaho. Now, a woman went up to the pulpit, and she talked about her love of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And yet I happen to know that this woman used her efforts to spread all kinds of libelous, hateful, ugly rumors about a man and destroyed him when he was running for the Idaho State Legislature. And in the end, he lost by only a few votes during the primaries just a few months ago. Another man stood up and he spoke about how to be saved. And his answer was, he said, follow the bishop. Do what the bishop says. Well, you know, I can't find anything in the Bible. I can't find anything in any Mormon doctrine that would lead me to believe that we should follow men. I believe we should follow Jesus. And so the thing that's interesting is I am going to prove to you beyond a shadow of any doubt that this Mormon bishop, that this malicious liar who hurts people's reputations, that this disseminator of false doctrine, and that Pastor Paul Thompson are all cut from the same cloth. So let's jump in. There's an old movie that I kind of like. It's called City Slickers. Now, it stars Billy Crystal, and he plays a middle-aged man going through a middle-aged crisis, and he and his friends rush off to do a cattle drive at a dude ranch. Now, at one point during the show, Crystal's all messed up and doesn't know what to do with his life, and the old cow boss, Curly, he says, you know, you all come here with all these knots in your rope. And he said, the problem is you have not found the one thing. The one thing. Well, I believe in the one thing. I believe that we should find the one thing that matters and then live in accordance with that. So what is my one thing? Matthew, 22nd chapter, talks about a lawyer who tempted Jesus. He said, Master, what is the great commandment in the law? And Jesus answered him. I'm paraphrasing, so I might mess this up a little bit, but Jesus answered, and he said, the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with your mind, your soul, your heart. In other words, he's saying, love God with everything that's in you. Make that the first love of your life. Jesus continued, he said, and the second is like unto it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Then he continued, he said, on these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. All the law and the prophets. Jesus said it. This is everything. He said, this is the one thing. Embrace it. Live by it. So if you want to know what my religion is, it is simply this. Love God. Love your neighbors. And if you want to know why I am here, it's because I love you. It's because I see that Twin Falls is in crisis. It's because I see that Twin Falls is being overrun by lawless men who violate the Constitution, who violate our supreme law, and care nothing about being held accountable to that. That's why I'm here, because I love you. Because I love you. In his sermon, Thompson spoke much that was true. And he spoke also many lies. But you see, the key to being a successful liar is to clothe your lies in enough truth that people will accept the lies along with all of the truth. You give them truth, lie, and maybe they won't recognize the lie. I believe that Thompson is very adept at this craft, and I believe I will prove it to you. So here's the first truth that he shared. And this is a true statement, and I would like you to follow that very carefully as we move forward. Let's see. Here we go.
We can't just take people's word for it. You should never walk away from a sermon at this church and take everything I say as truth without investigating it. If you don't, you're not behaving, as the Scripture would call us, like good Bereans.
You see, it's your duty. It's your duty to be informed, to understand, to investigate. I hope that you will do that based on the information that I share today. Now, Thompson continues.
We use the whole of Scripture to give direction to us.
We use the whole of Scripture. Now, in Thompson's sermon, he used Romans to attack me, to say that we must always, no matter what, show respect to our government leaders. Well, let's have a look at what the whole of Scripture says, because I believe that what he shared is just a narrow view. And while what he shared is truth in some circumstances, it is not the whole of Scripture. So we turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 7. What does it say? That there's a time for every purpose. That there's a time to heal and kill. There's a time to cry and to be happy. There's a time to plant and pluck up. There's all of these things. And so the question then, I guess, is there a time to stand boldly and aggressively against our government? Well, let's turn to Matthew chapter 12. You see, this section, or this chapter, documents the activities of John the Baptist when he was approached by a group of Pharisees and Sadducees. Now, did he fall down at their feet? Was he calling them sir and master and giving them all of this respect? Or did he say, looking them square in the eye, generation of vipers, generation of vipers? Consider Jesus himself. Did he not call them hypocrites? Did he not say, thou blind Pharisee, cleanse first that which is within the cup and platter, that the outside of them may be clean also? You see, Jesus was very bold with these people. And one thing we have to understand about these Pharisees and Sadducees is at the time of Jesus, the lines between religious leaders and government leaders were very blurred. And the Pharisees and Sadducees made up the leaders of the Jewish religion, plus they had roles in the government as well. And so John the Baptist and Jesus were speaking not only to the religious leaders of the time, but also to the government of the time. Thompson continued.
Twin Falls is a hellhole, according to the media. And that's an actual headline.
And that's an actual headline. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not anything close to that. You see, Matt Christensen at the Times News wrote a column where he was the first one, I believe, to coin the term Twin Falls is a hellhole. Now, Sherry Duvally of Redoubt News wrote a rebuttal to that, and she asked the question, and this is what her headline read. Has Twin Falls become a headline? Has Twin Falls become a hellhole? Question mark. Pastor Thompson says, the headline read, Twin Falls is a hellhole. But Sherry Duvally wrote, has Twin Falls become a hellhole? Big difference. Big difference. One is truth, one is a lie. Now, finally, Pastor Thompson concluded this hour-long sermon with a 3-minute rant attacking me. Have a listen.
Let me give you warning of one individual. I'm going to name a name here. There is an activist out of Pocatello who is an advancer. Listen, I'm in favor of the Second Amendment. I don't want my government to take away the rights to bear arms. There is an activist in Pocatello by the name of his first name is Lance, his last name is Earl. He's been in the city, and he's been one of the primary agitators at our city council meetings. Doesn't even live in the city, doesn't live in the county. But he comes and travels over here and points fingers and calls names of the police and the mayor, who I have a lot of disagreement with the mayor, but I'm still telling you, we don't have permission to speak like that to people of authority. So the Lance Earl has come, and he's had and has gathered a group of people who are calling themselves Christians that are following him. I've had a phone conversation with Lance Earl. I'm that kind of guy. I call people who show up at my city council meeting and while pointing at my chief of police, that he needs to surrender his badge tonight, and calling him names and of other such. I don't have any reservation to call such person and to have a conversation with him. In the conversation, he makes claims to be a Christian. And I took him to Romans 12 and chapter 13 and to James chapter 1 and Peter, and addressed a couple of other things out of the Gospels. And he wanted to say that his treatment of the chief of police in Twin Falls is equivalent to Jesus' treatment of the Pharisees in the synagogue. That he has every right to do what he's doing because Jesus did it in the synagogue. Well, I'm not opposed to tell someone that I think they've misinterpreted Scripture. That's a matter of spiritual issues. You want to make a whip and you want to come in and address some things, and come and do it to the church, not the civil, secular government. That's not how we interact with the secular government. Through the conversation, he further disclosed himself as not a Christian, but a Mormon. Well, unfortunately, there are a lot of Christians. I don't mean to imply, there's a lot. It's not a massive movement of people, but they're very outspoken. And they do make claims to be Christians, and they've allowed Lance Earl to have an influence on them spiritually. So here's two things that I want to bring to conclusion. It would be inappropriate for the church to partner up spiritually with Islam, and it's equally inconceivable that the church would lay aside Mormon doctrine to put ourselves under spiritual alignment to advance a Second Amendment issue. And at that, use a 5-year-old girl who was molested by boys in our community as the whipping post for the Second Amendment. That is unacceptable, and that is not the way God tells his people to engage in the government. So, I say that side of things to give warning to you, caution you.
Oh, that was interesting. That was a 3-minute segment, in which I documented 8 lies that you can prove to yourself. You see, these lies can be proven simply by going to the records, the public records of the Idaho City Council meetings and listening to the tapes that were recorded. So let's go through them one by one. Why number 1? He stated that I have been a primary agitator in the city council meetings. He said meetings. He said meetings as in plural. I've been to one. Lie number 2. Thompson stated that I came to the city council meeting and called the mayor and police chief names. It's a public record. Look for yourself. There were no names called. You see, I simply asked the mayor and the chief of police if they would tell me where their constitutional authority is for some of the actions that they're taking. That's all. That's all I wanted to do, was ask them to tell me where it is. See, they swore an oath to the Constitution. If they were living by that oath, wouldn't they review every action they take and square it with the Constitution? And if they squared everything they did with the Constitution, wouldn't my questions be the easiest instead of the most difficult questions which they have to run and hide to avoid answering? No, there was no name calling. And in fact, the closest I came is I said something to the effect of this. If this police chief is in violation of the Constitution of the United States, then he is an empty uniform. Well, isn't that true? If he is in violation of the Constitution of the United States, then he is violating the rights of the people. Doesn't that make him an empty uniform? If he doesn't even understand the Constitution of the United States so that he can protect our rights, wouldn't that make him an empty uniform? You see, the statement I made didn't call him a name. It just said that if these things apply to him, then he is an empty uniform. No name calling at all. That was lie number 2. Lie number 3. We don't have permission to speak like that to the people in authority. Well, we have just established from a scriptural basis that there are times when we do, where we do have that authority and when actually it becomes our duty. There you go. Lie number 4. He said, I had a phone conversation with Lance Earl. I'm that kind of guy. No, that is his kind of lie. You see, my interaction with Thompson began when he was critical of me on one of my blog posts, which he can do, that's fine. And so I looked him up on Facebook, and I made the connections to the church. And I called the church office to see if I could talk to him, because actually I am that kind of guy. And anyway, no one answered, so I left a message and asked if he would please call so that we could talk about our differences and see if we can find common ground. Well, he did call back, and so we had that conversation. He talked about what was said during that telephone conversation, and he lied to you again and again and again and again. Now, I can't prove that because I don't have a recording of that conversation. And so I'm going to stick with the lies that I can prove, and then suggest to you that if I can prove all of these other lies, I've already proven several, then isn't it likely that he lied about the conversation on the phone as well? Okay, lie number 5. He said that I pointed at the chief of police and demanded that he surrender his badge tonight. Again, it's a matter of public record. Look and see if it occurred. I'll have links below this video where you can check it out for yourself. It never occurred. Thompson lied to you, and he clothed it in enough truth that you wouldn't notice. Lie number 6. He said calling him names and other such. Again, never happened. That's another lie. Lie number 7. He said that there are people who call themselves Christians who have allowed Lance Earl to influence them spiritually. Nothing could be further from the truth. In Twin Falls, I have become friends with some of the most amazing Christians I have ever known. Their love of people, their willingness, their generosity, their faith leaves me awe-inspired. I would not begin to try to lead them. I would never do that. It is they who lead me. Lie number 8. He said that I have used a 5-year-old girl as a whipping post for the Second Amendment. There is no record at all of any comment I made ever which tied this little girl to the Second Amendment. I have never made that comparison in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, I've not even tied her to the refugee problem. You see, what I did do at that city council meeting is I asked the police chief and the mayor and the city council if they would explain to me why they have allowed the FBI to get involved in the investigation of this little girl. You see, the Constitution is pretty basic. It's easy to understand. And if we go to Article 1, Section 8, we will see all of the powers that are vested in Congress. And at no point is the federal government given policing powers inside the states, except for a few very limited things, like treason or the prosecution of counterfeiting. But with regard to the case of this little girl, the federal government has no policing power. The FBI has no constitutional policing power. None. And so the problem is, as Paul Thompson pointed out again and again and again throughout his sermon, there is this effort to have this one world government, to have the United Nations involved, to have all of these things. And the cause of that is the federal government. So if we allow the federal government to get involved in these investigations, they bring with them their federal agenda, their one world government agenda, their United Nations agenda. All of that nonsense comes with it. And that is why we must protect our rights and tell the federal government, out! You can't be here. The chief of police has a duty to do that. The mayor has a duty to do that. The prosecutor has a duty to do that. And they have failed. So, anyway. Now, I'd like to talk just a little bit about the one comment he made, a little bit more detail. He said we have no permission to speak to our leaders like that. Well, the Declaration of Independence is pretty clear. It says, after a long train of abuses, it is our right and our duty to throw off such government. Throw off! That would seem to indicate some force, wouldn't it? Throw off! That would indicate some power. Throw off! That would indicate some boldness. Throw off! That does not indicate going before them and crawling and saying, sir, and please, and may I. No. No. Now, it's interesting to me, in the years leading up to the Revolutionary War, a number of things happened. And one of the things that happened is the people from Massachusetts, from the Boston area, they went before the Continental Congress. And they were talking about independence and liberty and freedom. And we call them patriots today. But it's interesting to me that there were those from the other colonies, from most of the other colonies, and they wrung their hands and they says, oh, no, let's not stir things up. Let's be respectful and nice and write a letter to the king so that maybe his tyranny will be reduced. They didn't want to stop tyranny. They just wanted to scale it down a little bit, dial it back. So, anyway, those people at that time who were wringing their hands and worrying, they talked about those who fell at the Boston Massacre. They talked about those who bled and died on Lexington Green and at Concord. Talked about those who stood against overwhelming odds and were massacred at Bunker Hill. Talked about those who slipped onto ships and threw the King's tea in the bay. You see, those delegates from those wimpy states talked about these patriots, these heroes, exactly the same way that Paul Thompson talks about me today. I submit to you that if there had been a few more like Paul Thompson in the early 1770s, that we would still be British subjects today. We would. Now, I would like to invite you to take probably the best piece of advice that you got from Paul Thompson in his sermon and act on that. He said, investigate, learn, become informed for yourself. I encourage you to do that. So how do you do it? I'd like to make this one suggestion. On Wednesday, September 7th at 7 p.m. at the Che Restaurant at 1021 Blue Lakes Boulevard in Twin Falls, we will have Representative Heather Scott and Representative Ron Nate speaking to us. They will be presenting a program called The Power of the Engaged Citizen. Now, why would you even want to hear from these two representatives? Well, I can give you two great reasons. Both of them hold the highest possible score on the Idaho Freedom Index. So what is this Freedom Index? Why would you care? Well, this is an index that ranks legislators based on how they vote. Those legislators that vote with the Constitution, those legislators that vote for smaller government, those legislators that vote for more freedoms, those legislators that vote to get government out of our hair and out of our daily lives, rank the highest. Heather Scott and Ron Nate are the two best-ranked legislators in the entire state of Idaho. These are the leaders among our legislature. They're coming to teach us about the power of the engaged citizen. Primarily, Heather Scott will be presenting this. She is so amazing. I've known her now for several years, and she is incredible. She is what every legislator should be, and she will not only inform you, but she will send you home empowered. Now, I want to make you a promise. I want to promise you that you will not hear any of that scary Mormon doctrine. You're not going to hear anything that's going to be counter to your beliefs. None of that's going to be in play. Instead, what you are going to hear is truth. Now, in closing, I would like to share something just because it's hilarious. This has been kind of serious, and it might be fun to lighten the mood just a little bit. This is a statement from Paul Thompson's sermon.
Let me do a couple of things for you. This morning I mentioned item number 27 out of the Naked Communist. That's not the actual title of these 45 communist goals, but out of a book by an ex-FBI agent in 1958, Cleon Skousen.
Cleon Skousen. Actually, that's not the correct pronunciation. It's Cleon Skousen. I am a fan of Skousen's. And what Pastor Thompson said about him is true, and it's interesting to me that throughout this sermon, Pastor Thompson kept going back to him and these 45 principles that will ultimately bring us to communist and one world government. So throughout the sermon, he is going back. Skousen, 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 Skousen. Skousen, the Mormon. That's right. The Mormon. Cleon Skousen is a lifelong Mormon. Cleon Skousen served a Mormon mission in Britain. And so while he used Skousen to prepare you to hear that any association with Mormonism is bad, is evil, is he used the Mormons, or the words of a Mormon, to make his point. I'm Lance Earl. I'll see you soon.